perspectives. What is ethics is very subjective at times. So, how do different philosophers across the world interpret ethics is to be understood. In the last class, when we discussed about Aristotle, he was very concerned about the virtues that are required to be developed, and according to him, the virtues lie between two opposite vices, the two extreme positions, which is something that one should desist from. Here we discuss today Stuart Mill, John Stuart Mill, and according to him, in fact, his principle of moral conduct is referred to as utilitarian principle, because whether a behavior is ethical or not, that will be judged whether it resulted into the happiness of others or not. Happiness is the key word. So the determining, they say, if you think of Aristotle, virtue should flash in your mind. The golden mean rule: virtue is the essence. If the person is virtuous, and how can the person be virtuous? Because only if he occupies a middle position, intermediate position between the two vices: surplus, that is
Excuse me, sir.
excess. Yes, yes,
Some
yes.
girls are waiting.
Okay. So in between the two extremes, if you occupy the intermediate position, uh, it means that you have the virtue, and the more virtuous you are, the more ethical your approach towards enactment of various activities would be. So that was Aristotle. In this case, it is all related to happiness. Happiness is the catchword. And another dimension to figure this out is utilitarian, whether it has resulted into the happiness of others or not. Now, that is the key concern. So, John Stuart Mill approach towards ethics is that if your actions have resulted into the happiness of others. Now, what is happiness is to be discussed in its as per his requirements. So let us have a brief look at this observation. Stuart utilitarian theory. Write some of the information that you are required to maintain a record of. The ethical theory of John Stuart Mill, 1806 to 1873, and he was a English philosopher, is most extensively articulated in his classical text. The name of the book itself is Utilitarianism, and therefore his principle is referred to as utilitarian principle. Utilitarianism, which was published in 1861. Just note down these information, which is to be used when you take up this topic. Now, what is the principle? The principle is very short. It has no ambiguity, but it is open to interpretations, no doubt about it. But the principle is straightforward. The utilitarian principle states that, now, this is to be understood. Actions are right in proportion. Actions are right in proportion as they tend to promote, as they tend to promote overall human happiness. You see, ethics is all concerned about judging whether the action was right or wrong. Ethics makes you arrive at a decision whether the action that was undertaken by the person is right or wrong. So, according to Stuart Mill, actions could be considered to be right only if it adds up to the overall human happiness. Underline the word happiness. Happiness is the key term, and utilitarian. These are the two basic premises on which the entire philosophy hinges. So, it is all concerned about happiness. And just his observation, his quotation, it goes like this: principle of utility. It is also known as the greatest happiness principle. Just in
So
case.
Shubhangini Mishra is waiting for it. So please admit one of the girls. She is waiting.
Okay, okay, sure. In fact, two are waiting. Anyways. So, in case you get objective type questions, so they will be asking these typical ones. Remember the principle utilitarianism, and what the principle is. It is because this principle is also referred to as principle of utility. And what is the approach towards understanding utility? Anything that gives you happiness. Getting it? You consider a product useful because it renders the happiness that you expected. Likewise, the corollary is very straightforward. So, principle of utility, which is also known as greatest happiness principle. Please do remember these terms. Greatest happiness principle. What could add to the happiness, and that too in the greatest possible magnitude. Now, the principle states, and that is the prescription to judge whether the action was right or wrong. And action is right to the extent, and this is something that you have to learn by heart, this verbatim, in fact. An action is right to the extent that it increases the total happiness of the affected parties. We have to elaborate this statement, but first you write it. An action is right to the extent that it increases the total happiness of the affected party. And in the same vein, you write, action is wrong. Action is wrong to the extent, to what extent the action was wrong, to what measure, to what degree. The action is wrong to the extent that it decreases the total happiness of the affected party. Affected parties. Okay, we will come to discuss that. Happiness or affected party. And what is happiness? How can we have a fair amount of idea regarding it? Happiness may have many definitions, such as advantage, benefit, goods, good or pleasure, whatever. A favorable position, favorable outcome is in happiness. It may be an advantage that you get, it may be a benefit that you receive, anything good that has occurred to you physically, socially, mentally, psychologically, spiritually, whatever, or pleasure. Now, rules are based on the principle of utility. You see, ethical principle should follow this principle of utility. So whenever you develop the rule to govern a state, make sure that the rules are based on principle of utility, because a rule is right to the extent that it increases the total happiness of the affected party. Mind the word total happiness, they are using it time and again. The rule is right to the extent that it increases the total happiness of the affected parties. And obviously, the greatest principle is applied to moral rules. Now, let us discuss this, what you have written. An action is right to the extent that it increases total happiness of the affected parties. Affected parties, who are the affected parties over here? Not just the one who is on the receiving end of your action, but you yourself. Both form the system. So affected parties are both the individual who is the doer of the action and the one who is the receiver of your action. So they together form the affected parties. Now, if you do something and as a result of which you are happier, your behavior is ethical. You you derive happiness out of any action of yours, so that is considered to be uh, ethical, but that is an egoist approach. We will discuss it in a later slide. It goes beyond. They say, what do you think? When you help somebody, don't you feel good about yourself? Isn't it? You feel better. You help others because you derive satisfaction out of it. It's a feeling of wellness that develops because of your good act. If you harm somebody, you yourself are on that receiving end. You also do not feel good about it. So what makes you feel happy? This is one part, but what makes others happy, that is more important one. If any activity has made somebody else who is the other party happier, your action was ethical. So any action that contributes to the happiness of the other party concerned is considered to be an ethical behavior. That is well defined in terms of ethics. Now, have a brief write up of this principle as well. Maybe overlapping of some of the topics, still you write it. Write down actions are right to proportion. Actions are right to proportion as they tend to promote happiness. Why we talk in terms of proportion? How right or how wrong were you? You may be more right or you may be less right. It is a matter of proportion. So you cannot compartmentalize whether it was right or wrong. Even if you are right, what is the extent of your rightness? That is to be judged over here. So that depends upon how much happiness has been promoted because of that action of yours. So actions are right in proportion as they tend to promote happiness, comma, wrong as they tend to produce reverse of happiness. Not because this is a statement of his only, therefore we are writing in the same manner. We cannot bring about any changes in whatever his observation is. So your actions are considered to be wrong in proportion if they tend to produce the reverse of happiness. And he also argues that happiness as pleasure and absence of it is pain. Happiness as pleasure and absence of it is pain. So it's a pain and pleasure. There is a principle which refers to the fact that we seek pleasure and avoid pain. Anybody who knows this concept, what this philosophy is all about, which is guided by our id, one of the elements of personality, id, ego, superego. Id is very impulsive, very primitive part of our society, very wild, untamed horse, very impulsive, because it attempts to do whatever that would give the pleasure. It seeks pleasure and avoids pain. And that is what is referred to as hedonistic. A hedonist is a person who is obsessed with seeking pleasure and avoiding pain. So you do not care for the repercussions of any activity of yours that could give you instant pleasure. Getting it? Maybe this instant pleasure may result into uh, painful days ahead. You don't care. You don't care whether you have got your exam tomorrow. You are only concerned about, you see, doing whatever you like to, maybe watching a film late night, irrespective of the fact that you have got examination tomorrow and you are not even well prepared for that. But because this activity is giving you the pleasure, so therefore you are involved in it. You do not want to be bothered by what is going to happen the other day. So that is hedonistic. We do whatever that gives us the pleasure and we avoid pain. Add to that, pleasure can differ. Pleasure can differ in quality and quantity. Pleasure can differ in quality and quantity. Therefore, it is a relative term. You may be more happy or you may not be as happy. Quantity, quality and quantity, and that pleasure and that and essentially and pleasure are rooted and pleasures are rooted in one's higher faculty. Pleasure are rooted in one's higher faculties and accordingly should be weighted more heavily and accordingly should be weighted more heavily than baser pleasure. Now, what is meant by this? This is something intricate, and accordingly should be weighted more heavily than baser pleasure. So Stewart is of the opinion that pleasure has got different levels. Baser pleasure refers to the pleasure associated with your body, physical pleasure, maybe comfort, maybe whatever. You are concerned about the body. By higher faculty, we mean mind. Getting it? And he is of the opinion that the higher level pleasure is weighted more heavily as compared to the baser level pleasure. Baser level pleasure will not withstand, and the intensity of pleasure that you get is very transient. It will wither away. Like if you go for a very delicious uh, dish, the pleasure is there, no doubt, but it will not last for a longer period of time. By the time you have finished your meal, the pleasure is lost. But any pleasure which has which attains to a higher faculty, maybe your psyche, that is going to sustain and that is going to endure. It will be enduring in nature, and you will be getting more happiness if you attend to that uh, higher faculties. Getting you will be more happier. You will be more happy if you derive uh, pleasure at your higher level as compared to the baser level, because according to Stuart Mill, the baser pleasure are very transient. It will not last long, and therefore we should be very particular about attending to the pleasure at higher faculties, maybe uh, at the level of your mind. Maybe if somebody uh, has developed a unstinted uh, pursuance towards knowledge, this person will be seeking pleasure, no doubt. The more the person learns, the more person feel uh, self-actualized. But if you attend your pleasures that are connected just with the body, it is not going to last for a longer period of time. It is just it has got a transient effect. After a certain period, it will wither away. You perhaps may not even be able to recall such body pleasures. So this is what he says. And the last part is people's achievement, people's achievement of goals and ends, people's achievement of goals and ends, such as virtuous living, should virtuous living. Acha, when can you derive virtuous living? Only if you attend to the happiness that are associated at the higher level. Virtuous living should be counted, should be counted as part of their happiness, should be counted. That is what is meant by this. One should strive to attain to pleasure at higher level of the faculties, your mind, your thoughts, your spirituality. If that is being attended and you seek pleasure in those high level of uh, faculties, definitely you one should attach more weight to it. It is not being suggested that you should not attend to the physical, the baser level pleasures. Go for it, but there should be uh, a case of attaching weights. How much importance do you give to the pleasures at different levels? So, body related pleasures are not to be attached more of importance as compared to the pleasure at a higher level, that is mind, spirit, soul, and whatever. So, this is what utilitarianism is. We will conclude in the next class this Mill's ethical theory. So, that is for today. Thank you.
Thank you, sir.
Thank you all.
Thank
Thank
you,
you.
sir.
Thank you.